Worried that your mini doodle might end up weighing 90 pounds? Welcome to the club. You aren't alone and it's a legitimate concern. Maybe you've been looking online, you saw the memes. See the memes. My mini doodle is 6 months old and it weighs 60 pounds, and everyone has the laugh emojis on there or whatever. When will he stop growing, the people ask. Most of it's trolling, but the bad news is that once you get your forever friend, there is nothing you can do to change the size of the dog. The good news is that there are ways in which we can minimize the risk. And it is a risk, especially if you have something like limitations on how much you can lift, or you live in a rented place that has size limits on dogs. They can be real risks. So let's start with the basics. I'm going to give an overly simplified, I'm going to say this again, overly simplified illustration of how this works. For this illustration, I'm only going to use a model with 2 genes to show how the size works in dogs and how it can work with the doodles. But the reality is that in dogs, there are many, many genes that determine size, so it does get more complicated than this. But a 10-pound dog and a 100-pound dog, the genes are different. And so, for instance, what we're talking about, which is very, very common right now, is a 90-pound Bernese mom and a 10-pound stud dog. And many people do think that an F1, which is what this would be, is the best way to do things right now because of hybrid vigor, but this isn't necessarily the case. There is that benefit of hybrid vigor, but that decreases significantly when we introduce good health testing, and there are benefits to consistency. There's also downsides and potential downsides to what happens when we breed a 100-pound dog with a 5-pound dog, and there can be stuff with bone density and everything else. And so you can get a lot of variation in size in the doodles because of this. But here's the good news. There's other ways that you can estimate the expected adult growth and not just listening to what the breeder has to say. Although the breeder will give you good information. There's no guarantees in this, just like with any dog, but we can make good estimates. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to look at the size of the parents. The parents' size will start to give us an idea of that range and what to expect. But this alone is not reliable, and we have to get this. It's much better too if we look at the size of the parents' as well. Because if 2 grandparents were 10 pounds and 2 were 100 pounds, and then the mom and dad were 50, so you're expecting 50, that might not be what you get. And so we want to take a look as much as we can to the ancestors of these dogs as well. The next thing we want to do is we want to take a look and see if this breeding has been done before. Because if it has been done before, then we can take a look at what those offspring look like. They're probably a year, 2 years old at that point, and so we can see the size of what they turned out and what they look like as adults, and that gives us the best indication of what our puppies will look like. And then if there's a range, some of them are 30 pounds and some are 80 pounds, we need to take that into consideration. We also should ask the breeder what they expect the puppy size to be. And in this, we ask ourselves, is the puppy we're looking at the smallest? Is it the biggest one? Is it in the middle of the litter somewhere? And then we place it within that range. And again, these are ways that we can put together to make educated guesses. But as we put these different pieces together, we're going to get a much better picture on the size that our dog should be. Now, I had, for instance, before where I had 2 Bernedoodle sisters that I got, and one of them was about 60% the size of the other. The one was very, very noticeably bigger than the one. But once they went into their homes and they started getting the care personalized, where it wasn't like an environment of competition anymore, where the one wasn't really thriving. The small one wasn't thriving in that. But once she was in a home and she could eat at her leisure, wasn't competing for the food and everything anymore, within 2 weeks, she was caught up about 90% of where the other one was. So we have to take that into consideration. Like, we're estimating with this. Sometimes they're going to go through growth spurts and they'll hit the growth spurt before another one does because they're coming from different parents, different lineages, different breeds. And so we take all of these different pieces into consideration. And as we do this, we're able to get a much better idea of how big they are. See, we want to estimate, but the estimate should be it should be an educated guess. If I have 2 multi-gen doodles that have been bred for size for a few generations, I have a much, much better chance to accurately predict the size and the weight than with an F1 or an F2 generation. One additional piece of info in this is that the range given by the breeder, it isn't always right. It's an estimate. And we need to consider that. A breeder might tell you, and they have the best intentions in this, that the dog will be 30 to 40 pounds when full grown, and you could get a 25-pound dog, you could get a 45-pound dog, or something else. But if it's multi-gen, an experienced breeder and you're looking at the parents, the grandparents, the siblings, the size compared to the litter mates, all these things that we just talked about, you can be much, much more confident that your forever friend will turn out close to the size that you expect. The genetics, they work in similar ways in regard to eye color, in regard to coat color, and the coat type, and especially in regard to furnishings. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll talk about these things in the coming videos. We want to help you get the right dog that works for you, your lifestyle, and for your family.